All right, guys. So thanks for being here today with us. This Monday or whatever day you're listening to it. We're going to jump into this is the second part of the podcast where we go over 20 qualities of a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner. We're going to be going over 10 different ones today that, again, could be useful ideas to chew on, and they're useful qualities and ideas to implement into your training if you're not already doing those or doing them. And so I hope this podcast serves you well with your training. As always, thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. Charlotte's Web, you can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20. I know a lot of you guys have sent me messages trying to use the old code because you're like, like I got one just the other day. It's like, Chewy, I want to buy something, but Jiu-Jitsu is not working anymore. Jiu-Jitsu20 is the new code. And again, it's 20% off instead of 15, which is what it used to be. So again, you can check that out at charlottesweb.com. If you guys have never tried CBD, again, my encouragement to you is to try it out for a month and see what it does for you. Everybody's a little different. Again, it's a type of supplement, and just like any supplement or medication that we take, it affects all of us differently. And so, again, I encourage you to try it and see what you get from it. So, buy yourself a tincture, buy a pack of the gummies, whatever it is that it interests you, and then try it out for a month and see what kind of effects you have. Again, I personally use it for dealing with inflammation related to my training and everything else, as well as trying to help get better rest. And it seems to be good at both of those. It seems to have helped me with both of those in a big way. So I continue to take it, and I share the word of the products that Charlotte's Web makes because I like them. So check them out. Also, thanks to Matt at Epic Roll for helping make the podcast happen. You can check his website out at epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. And again, Matt is a Jiu-Jitsu black belt who makes Jiu-Jitsu gear for Jiu-Jitsu people because he's a Jiu-Jitsu person himself, opposed to some of these weird companies that are like out there on like Amazon and stuff that are just, their designs look like crap and they're basically just selling really cheap garbage because they want to try to make a buck off of Jiu-Jitsu people. He's a Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And again, I like supporting Jiu-Jitsu practitioners who are in the business and doing good stuff. And again, he makes really cool products. I love his shorts. I love his rash guards. I love his gis, love his t-shirts, love all the stuff that he makes. And so if you're in the market for some new gear or like t-shirts or anything jiu-jitsu related, check him out at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code, again, is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off on the order. And that applies to anything that he sells, minus some of his like special branded stuff that he does with McDojo or Mason Fowler or anything like that. Everything else is you can get a discount on. And guys, also thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. So guys, in Jiu-Jitsu, we understand that there's this kind of idea where like when you train, you understand that like you put in these little daily training sessions, and each one of those training sessions, I always view it like this. It's almost like a drop in the bucket, right? And that little drop in the bucket, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But let's say you've got that bucket sitting under a faucet. Overnight, eventually that bucket's going to be overflowing with water, right? And a lot of times this is how our jiu-jitsu happens, where we come in and we're training and we're overwhelmed by all the techniques and everything else. And again, every single training session is just one drop in the bucket, and they build up over time. And then it happens like this very slowly, where maybe 5 years down the road, you look back and you can't even imagine how you got so good at jiu-jitsu because you kept training consistently. Well, there's a really cool app that has become a sponsor to the podcast. I think they're doing something that's really cool. It's called Acorns. You can check them out at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. And basically, here's what they do. They set it up to where your spare change goes into your investments. So basically, every time you make a purchase with your credit, your debit card, a little portion of the change, right, just basically rounds up, goes into the investments that you set up on their website. And it's really cool because this does a couple things. One is it basically just makes it automatic. You don't have to think about it, but it also gets rid of this idea, because this happens in jiu-jitsu where people think that they have to do these big, grand things to be good at jiu-jitsu. And in reality, it's very simple. You just got to like keep training consistently. And with investments, it's a lot of times the same way. Investments very much are like a little drop in the bucket. And so every time you make a purchase, you're making a drop in the bucket, so to speak, towards your future and towards your investments. And so every time you make a purchase, it just puts a little bit of your change in there and it goes to your investments. You can also set it up to where every time you get paid, it puts a chunk of that money into your investments automatically. And again, they've got a really cool offer going on right now, which is if you invest $5 using the Acorns app at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu, so $5, you get $20 bonus to invest. So by you putting in 5, you get 20 back to then put into whatever you want to get started. And then you can start using the app afterwards. And again, something that Eugene and I keep thinking about is like basically it's like spare change, right? And imagine if you could take all the change that has been lost into couch cushions and the sides of car seats and everything else, and you could have taken that money over the years from purchases and put it towards investments. How much money would you have saved up by now, right? So it's a pretty important thing. And so they get rid of the barrier. They make it very simple, and you can check them out again at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can also check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, where you can get exclusive content that we don't release anywhere else, as well as podcast extras, videos, everything else. You can check us again out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And then also, if you guys want to join my Chew Crew email newsletter, you can do so by going to jujitsu.net/join, JOIN, where you'll get access to 3 free ebooks that I give away for joining, and you'll get my daily email where I give away tips, ideas, tactics for training, as well as different thoughts and ideas on things. And also, guys, I'm releasing a new product coming up. It's going to be a competition preparation product. A lot of people typically feel very underprepared for their competitions, and I've created the product with people in mind who aren't coaches. So this way, if you're not a coach, you don't have control of your training like I do, you can still find ways to create very focused training that will help you be better off in competition. And again, I'm going to be releasing that to the Chew Crew email list first before anybody else, and they'll get a special discount early on. That's one of the perks of being an email newsletter subscriber, is that they get first crack at everything that I do. And they also typically get a discount on things that aren't released anywhere else. And so again, if you want to get access to that, join the newsletter. And guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast. We did a previous podcast where we talked about 10 qualities, and then we had 10 more that we were going to do is based upon one of my emails that we did. And we'll start off with the first one, which is you can roll at various speeds depending on the situation. So this is something that smart jiu-jitsu practitioners are going to have to learn how to do. So people that come into jiu-jitsu a lot of times early on don't have a speed, or they don't have the ability to shift into different gears and different speeds. They have one speed. Typically that's really fast. And sometimes people that lack aggression, it's actually really slow. And so they're just stuck in that speed. And a good jiu-jitsu practitioner, and an intelligent one, is one that can turn up the burners and go faster, but also someone that can slow the pace down. And this is important because you're going to have periods of time where, one, you can slow the pace down and go a little slower to prevent injury or to allow yourself to recover. Or even if you're going against someone who you can't match speed because of their youth or whatever it might be, you might have to slow the pace down on your own. Also, you've also got to be able to turn it on, because sometimes if you're rolling with someone, you've got to be able to go. You can't, just go at a methodical, slow pace all the time. Sometimes you have to be able to turn up a little bit of aggression, and you've got to be able to push the pace on them a little bit. And this is a quick caveat, just as an aside. I see a lot of people who criticize brand new people for coming in and just going really fast and, criticizing them, telling them to slow down. Understand that typically you can't slow down in the beginning. If you're going fast, that's just what you're just wired as a little bit differently. Typically, you're only able to slow down as you gain experience and you gain a knowledge of what's going on, and you become a little bit more relaxed in the situation because you've been there before. A lot of times when things are brand new to you, it kicks up stress and anxiety and things like that. And it's very hard to slow down and be chill. But again, that's a tip for some smart jiu-jitsu practitioner. You've got to be able to roll at various speeds depending on the situation, whether you're going against some big bruiser or you're going up against a really small person relative to you, whom you've got to go a little bit slower so you don't injure them, or even if you go up against someone older, or even if you become older yourself, and you've got to be able to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and that I'll ask you this question as well, like how you recommend that white belts develop this. One thing that we've talked about is that, like, I'll tell some of the newer belts, like, hey, focus on your breathing, just focus on breathing in and out of your nose. And see if you can just keep that the whole time. That will sometimes slow you down a little bit. You find yourself that you're breathing like out your mouth, and you're probably going way too hard. You're inefficient. So that's just for newer belts, but it's really hard to do that, because you're right. You only have like one speed, and you're really in survival mode. You're just trying to freaking not get killed, and you're going to use everything in your repertoire to do that. So what do you have, Chewy? So what about, like, if you are working with a white belt that's having a hard time slowing down or kind of controlling themselves? What do you tell them?
Here's a couple things. One, breathing is really important. It's something that my coach told me to do, and it helped out big time. When I would get to a position, like let's say if it was a quick scramble, got to side control, got to guard or whatever, take a breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and just try to settle down a little bit and just sort of see what's going on. Typically, when you're in that sort of crazy, anxious, fast-going state, things are just happening and you're just reacting, and it's just all happening at once, and you're not really present for it at all. You're just kind of reacting to the whole situation. Another thing is to make sure that you don't go into the roles with an attitude of you have to win. A lot of times, because this was one of the biggies for me. When I rolled, I always rolled with the mindset of like early on that I was trying to win, right? Yeah. I always had to win, because you have to understand, like humans are always trying to build their self-esteem up. Right. And again, people can fight against this, but so much of what we do is to do that. I mean, we start from a young age where our parents or parental units, whomever we have that's an authority, give us, self-esteem and affirmations. Oh, you're a good boy. Good job, buddy, because you did something. And then we do that behavior more because we like the way that feels, right? Everybody likes to be recognized. Everybody likes to feel good and be told they're doing a good job. Later on, it's your coaches. Later on than that, it's your bosses, it's your peers. And when you do something good, it feels nice. It feels good to see that. Yeah. But you've got to fight against that base instinct sometimes, because if you're only fighting for the, please look at me, coach, I'm doing something good, or your other peers or whatever, then you get stuck into always feeling you have to win.
Yeah.
And if you always have to win, then you're not going to be able to slow down, because you're just going to have to go really fast all the time, because you've got to push yourself. And if you're at a technical disadvantage, then again, you can't slow down. So you've got to break from that a little bit. And you've got to say, there's going to be a time when you have to fight to win, but then there's also got to be a time when you're just trying stuff, and you can still go hard, but at the same time, if you lose, it's okay.
Right.
And that allows you to be in a little bit more relaxed state. And I think also too, a lot of people come into jiu-jitsu a lot of times, and they again, we, from the time we're kids, we're taught that there's a good and a bad way to do something, a right and a wrong way to do it. And so when people do jiu-jitsu, what do they say? Oh, I suck at jiu-jitsu, because they do something wrong. You don't suck. You just haven't practiced very long, right? Yep. There's no suck about this. But you hear that language and you're like, you've been conditioned to believe this. Like, so when they do something, they're like, I'm doing it wrong. Well, yeah, you're doing it wrong technically, but you're just practicing. You're figuring this stuff out. You'll do it right eventually. Just give yourself some slack. And a lot of people bear those thoughts, and it creates this anxiety in them when they're going. And so because of the fact that they don't want to lose, they don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to feel bad. Right. So you got to fight against that base instinct a bit. And then again, along with the breathing, along with the sort of not going with the mindset to win all the time, the other thing is just to simply try to check in with yourself a little bit from time to time. Again, it's a meditative practice. And this isn't to be super woo-woo about it or anything like that, but try to watch what's going on in you, right? Like, think about it. Like when you get to when a position happens, slow down a little bit and think like, why do I feel this way? For instance, a lot of people early on get very claustrophobic. I was this way, get very claustrophobic in the bottom of mount, bottom of side control, and they get really freaked out about it.
Yep.
And people will even say, I can't breathe. I'm like, you can breathe. Just slow down a little bit. You can breathe. Like, I mean, that person cannot possibly squeeze you hard enough that they're compressing your lungs to the point where you cannot expand. You've just got to slow down a little bit, right? Unless you've got some sort of asthma or some other issue. Sure. And so a lot of people, you've got to check in with yourself from time to time and like just sort of take a scan of your body and go, why am I so on edge? Why am I like this right there? And again, just sort of take note about that, because again, I think this is one of the reasons why, like we were doing some breath work and meditation after the Monday night classes, and me and some of the guys were talking, and we were talking about like how fighters have to be in tune with their body, right? And you think about that, because we've got to be in tune with our physical body because of what's going on, and we also have to be in tune with the mental side, because there's times where we're in frustrating situations and our mind's telling us to give up, and we got to keep going, and there's all kinds of stuff. And so tune in with your body from time to time, because it can help you recognize, like, oh my God, like I'm going so fast. My shoulders are really tense. I'm gripping onto something with a death grip. Why am I death gripping this? This isn't even a good grip. Yep. Let go. It's okay. Just relax. And just that awareness a lot of times can be key in changing a behavior you would like to adjust, right? Yep. Just being aware that you're doing that because then you could recognize it and you can stop it or slow it down.
Mm-hmm. And the only other thing I'll point out about the breathing is like you talked about taking those couple deep breaths. If you're at a points tournament, you got to hold position. So even like conditioning yourself, take a couple deep breaths, like after you pass, maybe get into side control or something like that to establish your position, get your points. That's a valuable thing too, because sometimes you'll see with white belts or even blue belts that aren't really competition savvy, they'll move too quickly and they won't stay long enough to get the points. So that's something to maybe work on, incorporate your breathing with that.
Sure. And even in the gym, it's a good idea to hold position for a little bit longer, just to establish position before you go for the submission, right?
Yep.
Next one. A smart jiu-jitsu practitioner is able to undulate, that means like change back and forth, between their A game and new techniques that will push them to improve. And so the basic idea between this is, if you're brand new, you may not even know what your A game is. But there is a point for many jiu-jitsu practitioners where they stop improving at an exact time when they should be improving more rapidly. And this is typically once they formulate a decent A game, a decent game that allows them to win. Typically around especially around your blue belt. I mean, white belts will have a little bit of an A game, but around like blue belt and purple belt, you'll really have a really strong A game typically. And there's an issue there because what happens is people will a lot of times, and this isn't jiu-jitsu, this is just in general, people understand that when they get into something brand new, they are going to endure a lot of discomfort. They're going to endure some hardships. They're going to have to sacrifice some different things of this nature. But then what happens is once they get to a certain point, and we're talking about jiu-jitsu now, once they get to a certain point with their game, they begin to lose their stomach for that discomfort because they've gotten pretty good at it. And then they're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? How many times have you seen or heard of a higher belt get upset for losing to a lower belt, right? That created discomfort because essentially, right, we all have a movie reel that plays in our head all the time of who we are, who we think we are, and what we're up to, and how cool we are, or whatever. And a higher belt might say that I'm a higher belt, I'm a brown belt or a purple belt, and I shouldn't lose to a blue belt or a white belt, right? But then the problem with that is that if that's the movie reel that's playing in your head, you then become unable to play around with new stuff. Because if you play around with new stuff, again, you're moving into a place where you're going to be more vulnerable and you might be caught by someone who is technically less skilled than you overall. But because you're trying to play in this new area, you might get caught. Yep. And if you're too attached to the movie reel, then you're going to have a problem. Now, real quick, before everybody starts thinking, oh, the ego, you got to lose your ego. It's not about losing your ego. It's not being too attached to it. There's an over-identification with your ego. But at the same time, if you don't have an ego, like when you look at mental disorders where people can't formulate an ego, like they'll do weird stuff. Like I was reading a journal where the guy said that this patient was taking sand and just smashing it into their face because they don't know where they start and where the sand starts, right? There is no differentiation between the environment and themselves. And so we have to have an ego because an ego is who we are. And you have to have a strong ego to understand what you're capable of and to be a good practitioner / competitor. Yep. But we can't be too over-identified with who we are at that given point in time, right? It's like, Eugene and I are getting older. And both of us have experienced a little bit of a thinning hair, right? Like we get in there and like we're like, "Hey man, what's going on?"
You
right?
Keep
like,
saying that. I haven't seen it yet.
You come over to my house next time and I'll show you because it's not terrible, right? I'm doing all right, but like compared like over the last 3 years, it's like kind of gone back a little bit, But again, it's just one of those things where you notice it, you're like, oh my god, like, and again, if you get too over identified with like, hey, I got hair. Or I've got this really thick head of hair, and then all of a sudden it starts thinning. That can be a problem. It's no different than with jiu-jitsu, right? So if you get too over-identified with this thing, you then lose your stomach for discomfort because you've gotten over-identified with this comfortable place that you inhabit. You're like, I'm good, and I don't lose to these guys, and I'm here. And then you'll stick to doing the same techniques for a long period of time. And what ends up happening is right when you're at that point when you're becoming way more knowledgeable, you can watch a video and you can instantly try the technique in the gym and all these really positive things. You're not doing it because you're too worried about losing or not feeling comfortable or not beating everybody on the mat or losing to someone that you shouldn't lose to, technically. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that's an issue. So you've got to be able to, one, play your A game when it's time, but then you've also got to be able to play with different stuff. You've always got to be doing the research and development on the back end to bring in new techniques and new weapons into your game. Otherwise, you will experience stagnation. And that's typically like the main reason why people experience plateaus is because they're doing the same stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about trying new things or new techniques or even going to a seminar or something, picking something up, a little nugget of something, because that can kind of invigorate your game. You may find a technique that you stopped using, and all of a sudden it shows you just a different way to hit the choke or get there or get the position, whatever it is. It can really it can fire you back up, so it make you a little more excited about some of those things. So I think keeping it fresh, knowing you have an A game and touching on that. And there's a time to do that as well. There's a time to really hone in on your A game, which is, tournament time or prepping for a tournament versus like if you're just kind of not planning on competing and you're just trying to work on some new things or I think there's definitely a time to work, and that can be difficult too as a newer belt. When you get a little bit, like you said, a purple belt, you should be able to know what your training, kind of how your training needs to look and what's worked and what hasn't worked for you throughout the years.
That's right. And if you have a particular issue like with this, because I used to, where I didn't want to lose, here's the best way to get over it. Roll with someone and purposely put something out there and let them submit you and realize it just doesn't matter. Like it's insignificant. It doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. And then get up and start rolling again. And like it's a very freeing thing because when you can do that, your game can be so much better. You don't have to what if yourself because you're not worried about losing. You can go after things 100%. Because again, as I've talked about multiple times on this channel, on this podcast and my YouTube channel, fear of losing is paralyzing. Dislike for losing is fine. Like I hate losing. I don't like it at all. And I do my best to make sure it doesn't happen, but I'm not afraid of it because it's going to happen at some point. And losing on the mats and getting beaten on the mats is perfectly fine. Don't be afraid of it. Otherwise, it'll paralyze you from being the best possible grappler you can be. And so the next one is a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner isn't sidetracked by a loss of short-term motivation, but instead focuses on the long-term goals. So basically, you're not sidetracked because you lose motivation on the short term because you got long-term goals. And so this is something that happens a lot of times with people. They say, "Oh man, I lost my motivation," right? And motivation's one thing, right? Motivation's not a bad thing. Motivation a lot of times is the spark that gets us going with something, but you should not expect motivation to be there all the time. Motivation is often not there with me. And I may say motivation. I do things because I do want to do them. But when you're talking about that motivated feeling, I mean, I'm motivated to do them because I want the results from the long-term reasons, but I'm not motivated in the sense where I'm like charged up, I got to go and do this stuff. Let's go every single day. I mean, I have my days where I am and I have my days where I'm not, but my days where I'm not sidetracked by the fact that it's not there. I just do what I know I need to do because I have a long-term goal that I'm shooting for. And so that's important. And so you should set some sort of long-term goal for yourself. And it doesn't have to be written down and explicitly done some way where it's measurable or whatever. Just what do you want? Right. And then what actions do you have to take to get to that thing? Or what actions do you think you need to take? Because sometimes we don't even know. Yeah. And then you just chug away. And again, regardless of whether or not that spark of motivation that gets you really like fired up is there, you just do it because you know it's what you need to do. And so that's a big one. A lot of people get sort of sidetracked because when you start jiu-jitsu, it's very easy to be motivated. It's new, it's exciting, it's everything else. And then it loses that luster, that newness to it. And then it's like, okay, I'm doing jiu-jitsu. And people look at that as it's a negative thing. It's not a negative thing. That's just life, right? It's like, you have a spouse. When you first meet your spouse, everything's new, it's exciting. You're learning all this stuff. And there's just all this newness around it and mystery. And then eventually they're not so mysterious. You know everything about them, right? And you realize that this person that you sort of thought about, like they're different than what you expected in some ways and better than in some ways, whatever. Sure. And you're not going to be fired up to see them like you were when you first started dating. That doesn't mean that the relationship's bad. It just means that the relationship has changed. And your relationship with jiu-jitsu will change. Your relationship with anything will change. And again, whether or not you continue to do it should not be based upon whether or not you feel like it. Because again, that's giving way to your emotions. in a big way. And again, emotions they're kids. You don't lock them in the trunk, but you don't let them drive the car either.
Yep.
And so you have to think about, okay, like, well, is this bringing something valuable to me? Do I enjoy doing this long term? Are there things that I want from this? Does this bring something positive into my life? And if the answer is yes, then you just do it anyway.
Right. That's the key thing, is enjoyment. Like, motivation is going to, come and go. And I think there's also sometimes a problem with being very, very highly motivated, because that can follow. You can't keep that pace up all the time, or that highly motivated state. You're going to have lows there. And if you expect to be like really highly motivated, you're going to be disappointed, because you can't keep up that kind of motivation. With high motivated days, you're going to have some low days. And so I think it comes down to, like, obviously, like you said, what's your ultimate goal, to improve in jiu-jitsu or whatever it is. It could be something more specific, but like, it comes down to, do you enjoy what you do? Does it give you that enjoyment? Does it make you happy? Or if you do jiu-jitsu and you leave the gym and you're like, man, that was a waste of time, then probably not for you. But if you leave the gym and you're like always like happy that you were there, even if it was a shitty day on the mats, if you're happy that you were there, you're like, man, I'm glad that I went. And that's the reason, for me to train. I'm always happier after I leave, even though if it's not a great day on the mats.
Yeah, and I would be careful too much with the happiness too. I mean, like, happiness is good, but at the same time, how many things have you done in your life where after it was all said and done, you were glad that you did them, but like in the middle of it, when you were accomplishing whatever that thing was, you're like, fuck,
Yeah.
like you question yourself a little bit.
That's
So
where
again,
the ultimate goal comes in, right? That's
that's where you gotta separate yourself from how you feel in the moment, because sometimes we have feelings about things, and sometimes we get upset about stuff, and you need to take some distance from it, take a step back, and wait for your emotions to cool down so you can look at it in a more logical point of like, do I actually want to do this or do I not want to do this? Not, I had a bad day today because so and so screwed me. This was stupid, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because people do that, and you don't want to do that. So,
well, and I think consistency of the, like, are you consistently like happy you've attended jiu-jitsu and stuff, like, not like just like, I had one bad day on the mats, I'm pissed. I've had that where I've had bad performances or bad tournament, and I'm like, shit, I don't want to do jiu-jitsu right now at this moment. I want to break, but usually something comes and brings me right back. So that's how that works.
The next one here is, does a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner does their best to be a good follower, and in turn will make a good leader someday. So this is an idea that a lot of people struggle with, because we live in a time of like instant gratification, and we live in a time where people will try to circumvent the normal processes so that they can just simply be in the front. Jiu-jitsu is not as bad, but in a lot of cases, people will sort of circumvent the normal processes that they would have had to have done previously to prove themselves and be credible, just so they can just be in the front, like, look at me, like I'm doing something, regardless of what's actually true. And so you don't want to be one of those people, right? Like, you want to take your time, you want to do it the right way, because you'll be rewarded for that in some way, shape, or form. Regardless of whether or not, again, we all have those things where we're like, we see things and we want to be there. We want to be at that point. It's like driving a car and you want the road trip to be over because you want to be at the destination at some point. But again, the road trip is just a part of it. You got to go through it. And I've seen a lot of people over the years, they want to be jiu-jitsu coaches, or whatever. And they do it too early, and they don't put enough focus on being a good follower first. Yeah. And so in turn, they don't know how to be a good leader. They haven't soaked up enough energy or enough of the teachings and everything else. And if they're so focused on themselves, they're not going to be the best leader, because how can you be a good leader if you're not dedicated to on the other side, right? Because to be a good follower, you got to be dedicated. Okay, you got to be loyal to the person that you're following. On the flip side, if you're a good leader, you're dedicated and you're loyal to the following that you have to guide. And so it has to be the both ways. And I've seen several over the years, people go into coaching or leading gyms and things like that prematurely. And this thing happens where they did it because they wanted to be the person. And then they got in there, and because it was so focused on them, people would come in, and then people would also leave very quickly. They'd have a high attrition rate in their gym, even higher than normal. And these people who were dedicated and really wanted to train, they would leave and go to other gyms because they felt like the coach wasn't really in there for them. And so I think it's a wise idea. Like if you want, if like a jiu-jitsu coach or whatever is something that you're striving for someday, dedicate yourself to, the person that's following, that's leading, the leader, right? Like, and again, if they do bad stuff, that's a different situation. But assuming that they're a decent person, decent human being, you follow them and be dedicated to that and be 100% in. And then when opportunities come up, you'll probably find yourself in a situation to where you can take advantage of them. That was how it happened to me. I was like, I was the quintessential like jiu-jitsu student who was down for whatever. I'd teach classes for free if I had to. I didn't care. I was like, I just wanted to teach. I was training all the time. I was there to support the gym. I was there to support the other guys that are getting ready for fights. If guys had to get ready for competition, I was there to support. I was there all the time doing that stuff, and I was on the mats all the time, and I was there to support my coaches in any way possibly that I could. And so again, then when the gym was switching ownerships and a new coach was needed, I was there, and that's how that worked.
You got to pay your dues, man. There's no way around it. I mean, you have to, and you have to be. I think I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I just don't see any way you can be a good leader without being a good follower first, because you got to know what works and what doesn't, what worked for you, and what you responded well to it, and what are the attributes of a leader that you model yourself after, right? Like, if we try to, like, for you, for example, you lead from the front, you say things, or you may have certain concepts and ideas, and you do those things. So it's like when you're like telling us something, we believe you because you do it, and you've shown us through your own work the success that you've had, right? So like that's just how it is. It's like you're not gonna teach a marketing course if you have no idea about marketing. You've never been successful yourself, right?
But in marketing, a lot of people do that.
That's a weird thing, though, man. That's a weird thing. That's about, and you know this better than anybody, Chewy. You've been on both sides of this thing, right? You've been a student now, and now you have people that you teach this side, the marketing side to.
Yeah.
So like, like, man, like, you can create this persona and this thing, like, with, videos and lights and flashy items in the background. You can create this persona in marketing specifically. But like in jiu-jitsu, like, if you can't teach, like, if people, you can't teach them how to do the proof is in the pudding, really. And like, you won't get good results. Like with the marketing thing, you're not gonna get good results. People aren't gonna make money if you don't teach them the right stuff, because you didn't do the stuff yourself.
Well, so this is completely aside. And again, this is more of a business thing, but maybe people will be entertained by it. So I get these messages from people like on a daily basis saying like, basically, hey, Chewy, or hey, they don't say Chewy, they say, hey, Nick. That's how you know they don't know me. Hey, Nick, we really like your videos on YouTube. And then it would like put a title of one of the videos was a really good one. We would love to send, or I'd love to send you some stuff to improve with your copywriting or whatever to help you make more money. And the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, man, show me what you got. And then they sent this boilerplate template copywriting that was terrible, it was awful. I'm a student of copywriting. By the way, if anybody's on this, you guys are copywriters, shoot me a message. I need to hire like a junior one to help me out with some stuff. But these cold email templates are absolute garbage. So eventually I got one guy, and it was so bad. Like, you could tell where the text was originally one font, and he had copied and pasted stuff, and that was a different font, and it stood out. I was like, this is garbage. I replied back, I'm like, is this a bot? And he's like, no, this isn't a bot. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, where are you guys getting this cold email template from? And he sent me this like website. I'm like, man, you need to get your money back, bro. I was like, this is absolute garbage.
It's so awful to hear that. Like, if you're trying to preach that and somebody's like, no, this shit sucks.
Well, he got very defensive too. And I'm like, bro, like, you can say whatever you want to. I was like, I would love to hire another copywriter because I could use them. But I'm like, you're not even putting any work into this, and you haven't developed any of the skill necessary. Like, if you want to be a good copywriter, you got to do something. You got to write every day. It's like, if you want to be good at jiu-jitsu, you got to write. You got to do jiu-jitsu often, right? If you want to get big and swole, you got to go lift weights. I mean, there's no secret to it. You've got to do practice. That's the way you get good at something, and you can't just copy and paste something and think that's going to work. And it was such junk. But again, it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu, right? Like, you can't just, you can put on some smoke and mirrors for a little bit, but eventually your skill is going to be exposed in some way, shape, or form. And it's just not a good idea. And again, it's a useful thing when you're wanting to become a leader someday, to really focus on your own experiences, to focus on what you get out of everything. So this way you can have a cup full of experiences that you can then dole out to your students someday and to your followers. Because if you don't do that first part, if you just like want to race to the front of the line, then you get to the end and you got nothing to show for it. You have no experiences to give out. You have no wisdom, which comes from experience. You're just this person that's, wanting to be the person because you're going on an ego trip.
Yeah.
So just an idea. Next one.
You got to put the reps in for sure.
A smart jiu-jitsu practitioner is willing to invest in their skills through coaches, seminars, courses, and other resources. So this one's an interesting one because a lot of people have a poor, I've experienced this more and more. A lot of people have a poor mindset with money and what it is, right? It's like, for instance, like the fact that a coach might, granted, there are some coaches that are sketchy with their money, but the fact that someone might charge something for a service sometimes really wigs people out. They're like, this is terrible, whatever, it's nuts. But money can be a really useful tool. And some of the best things that you can spend on money is skills. Now, again, it depends on what you want to do with it. For me personally, I'm a very frugal person when it comes to stuff. Like, I could buy a really nice car if I wanted to. Don't want one. Don't really care about them that much. The house that we bought, we could have afforded a house that was much more expensive. We didn't, because I don't want to be house poor. I don't, because this is like the thing, like when like 2020 happened, I was okay. Like I had money in the bank and I lived well within my means. I'm fine. Right.
Yeah.
And we were able to do okay. The gym, same way. The gym was doing great. We're fine. We're able to weather the storm. But with skills, I spend a lot of money on skills. I pay a lot of money for books and for courses and for things like that, both in jiu-jitsu stuff, but also business and stuff a lot too, because I find it valuable. And I found that as my skills have gotten better in jiu-jitsu, I do better. I'm able to teach better. I'm able to win more matches. As I do courses in business, I get more knowledge. I'm able to, make more money for the business, able to serve the students better. All these positive things. Yeah. I've even had several tournaments where I have won matches due to either a course, a seminar, or something that I went through that I was taught that I had to pay for from another person that made my game better.
Yeah.
My sweeping game basically got completely changed over from a seminar at one point. And so it's a valuable thing. And so again, I'm one of those people, I'm very frugal about some stuff, but when it comes to my skills and my own development, I'm pretty liberal with the way I spend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, for business, I think a coach is very, very valuable. I think it's very important. I think they can help you. Honestly, like people think, well, I'm spending money on this coach every month, right? Versus like you could spend 10 years, wasting your time trying to figure it out on your own, and maybe 2 years getting a nice streamlined approach. Like, so I, like you, for example, you hired, a strength conditioner or somebody to kind of write a plan for you, right? You know what you're doing, but somebody can streamline it for you and like figure it out, and takes a lot of the mental energy away from you having to focus on something like that. And it's something you can get more benefit from.
Well, right. Well, because I paid the guy, Eli, my nutrition coach, I paid him a pretty good chunk of change to write me a program and write me a diet plan.
Yeah.
Specifically for me. One, the guy spent like over a decade diving into this stuff.
Yeah.
100%. All full time, right? For over a decade, diving into this stuff. And so why do I want to spend the time to try? Because first off, if I tried to learn all this stuff that he's learning, it would cost me more in the long run because of the fact that my time would be absorbed doing that.
Sure.
Right. Whereas if I said, hey, listen, I'll pay you this much money and I don't have to think, and he'll do all this, it's like, that's so much time saved on me that then allows me to be better at other areas.
Sure.
And so it's silly. It's interesting how people have been conditioned to spend money for things like a college education, for instance, right? Like there's nothing wrong with it. But, you go to college and you come out and you're in massive amounts of debt. Okay. But then in other areas of their life, they don't feel like they should have to pay, or they don't want to pay. And you're like, so you just spent, $40,000 for a degree you're not even using. Not to say this is everyone, of course. And then you're having trouble spending a few $100 because to pay for like this workout plan or something that can like change you in 6 weeks if you follow it.
Yeah.
Like, just silly to me, you know?
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have the money, that's one thing. And again, you know, I don't want to bash college too much, because obviously if you're in a very specialized field, engineering, medicine, things like that, you need a college degree. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? You absolutely have to have one. I wouldn't want to have a I wouldn't want to have a guy operating on me that was like, hey man, I learned how to
me.
this guy showed me how to do it. I learned how to do this by practice on the cat, you know, but yeah, you need it. But in a lot of cases, a lot of times you can make use of other people's skills to get you up to speed faster. This is why jiu-jitsu is getting so much better faster, because the coaches are getting better. The coaches have more knowledge, and the knowledge is being spread more abundantly. So it's easier to get better faster, and which makes us all better. It's a good thing.
Yeah. I you know, seminars are for jiu-jitsu. I mean, I think some people are like, oh, am I going to benefit? Yeah, I think everybody will benefit from going to a seminar, because you'll pick something. If you can pick one thing up, I mean, you gotta think. We've been training for quite a while, but if you can pick one thing up that you can incorporate into your game that can make a difference, that's just that could be very, very valuable.
Yeah, and I'll leave it with this. Some seminars do suck. I've been to some that suck. And it happens sometimes. But even if you can get a good seminar where, like, even if you don't learn a ton, you still get the energy from the person. I find there's value sometimes literally just in interacting with people sometimes, because like someone's energy can get me charged up to want to go do something, just being around them, you know what I mean? And so that can be positive in its own right.
Yeah. Sometimes even the Q&A, like we got some Q&As after you're in the seminar, and like you just hear some stories, some really cool stuff, which can, like you said, can charge you up.
Yep. A smart jiu-jitsu practitioner understands that it's not just what you do, but how you do it that really matters. And so I'll give you an example of this in competitions. This is my philosophy on things too, guys. So again, maybe you disagree. I have won matches that I don't care to remember because they were awful. I've also won matches that I'm incredibly proud of, and I'm really happy with the way things went. It's like, I could draw you an image. I could draw you a picture, and the picture could just be whatever. It could suck. It just, here's a picture. I just drew this, right? Or I could put some time into it and make it into a really good picture, and it's something that I'm proud of, and it's something that people actually want to look at. And then that's a different situation. And I think that a lot of times people in jiu-jitsu, you can sometimes forget that, again, while you're doing this stuff, it's not just about what you're doing, but how you do it. You know, even the way that you train, you can train really hard, but are you respectful? Are you good to your training partners? Do you help make them better? Do you push them up? When you compete, are your matches even worth talking about? Do you basically get on someone and basically sit there and just lay and pray for the whole round and win by 2 points or an advantage? Or do you go out there and go kill someone? You try to go submit them, right? Two different things. And there's a lot of world champions whom you have no clue who they are. And it's because they're not worth talking about. They're not remarkable. And it's not to be mean. It's just, they don't do anything. But the ones that go after and really go for the finish, you know who they are because they stand out. And because it's not just that they're winning, but how they're winning that's really, really important. And so it's worth talking about. Again, I think it's really important. Like, you think about how many world champions there are in jiu-jitsu that you don't know their names. But then how many do you know? Name the ones that you do, and they typically have good matches. They're typically entertaining to watch because they go for the finish, and that's a big deal. That's important. And so I think that, you know, in a lot of things that we do, not just jiu-jitsu, but it's about not just what we're doing, but how we do it. How do we go about doing that thing? How do we accomplish those things? It's really important.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I agree. Like with the intention and the effort that you put in, right? Like, what's your intention? Like, if you go on a match and your intention is just to like you said, just win by advantage, you know, it's probably, I mean, and there have been very exciting matches where people are like trading blows and they're trying to pass each other's guard, and there's scrambles and stuff, and there's an advantage victory, right?
Right. Of course, this happened all the time.
Absolutely. Or you know, it draws, and in draws nobody gets the submission, but they're just exciting. But like, yeah, it's just the intention behind, you know, what you do, like what the effort you put in. And I think that's valuable because you can see that as well. I think you can see that in how people perform.
Right. Well, you could go to the gym and you could go train for, 2 hours. You go get your 2 hours of training in, or your hour of training or whatever. Or you could go to the training and you could really push yourself. You could be really focused on your training, you could be really dedicated to that training session and give it everything you got. Same amount of time, same eventual thing that happened. You went and trained, but the way that you did that, the how of those two, very different.
Yeah, and a different outcome sometimes too.
Usually a different outcome. Almost always a different outcome.
All right, let's hop to the next one.
A smart jiu-jitsu practitioner realizes that their biggest and most challenging component is themselves. Very simple idea, right? You're always going to be your biggest enemy. Everything from your mindset before you get ready to do something and you second guess yourself and you get overly nervous and you build some situation into something that it's not because you're just nervous about the situation, to simply getting in your own way with different situation stuff. But all of us, I mean, I think that's a lot of times the biggest enemy that we all deal with is usually ourselves on some level.
Yeah, we're our own biggest critic. I'm my own biggest critic. And I probably, you know, I would never stand for sometimes how I talk to myself. Like I wouldn't have anybody talk to me that way. You know what I mean? Like the way that I talk to myself sometimes if I have like a bad performance or I'm unhappy or something didn't go my way. So like I think we are sometimes our own worst enemy, and we can, you know, limit ourselves through, you know, fear, like you said, like I'm afraid to lose. So you're just or you have negative self-talk and you don't go out there and you don't perform the way you should or the way you want to. So I think you're right. I mean, I think as long as you're good to yourself and you understand that, you know, that as long as you put the effort in, that's what you can control, right? Like internally we can control our effort and our dedication to what we're doing. Can't really control the outcome, but we can, you know, that's the main thing.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one is that a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner understands that they will fail or be incompetent with most things in the beginning. Thus, they aren't discouraged when things don't go well early on because they already accept that it would happen that way. So again, really simple. In the beginning, you're going to suck at whatever you do. There's no way around it. Even people that are, quote, naturals at something are typically not very good in the beginning. And anytime you go into something brand new, whether it be a brand new sport, a brand new endeavor of any sort, or even if it's simply like you're going in jiu-jitsu, you go into like play with a different position, right? Like not even a new sport. You're just doing a new like little section of that particular sport. You're going to suck at it. Like, and you should expect to suck at it. And it's okay to suck at it because you haven't practiced it much. And so you accept that going into it and you don't really get upset about it. But people a lot of times do. They get into something and they expect that somehow for whatever reason, they're supposed to magically be good at it early on. And that's silliness. And so again, anytime you do anything, you should always expect to not be very good at it at first.
I think you had said that you expected to be good at jiu-jitsu because you already had a wrestling background. You figured you'd be really good, right?
Yeah, I was dumb.
Yeah, so maybe you weren't smart at the beginning.
I was dumb, man. I was stupid. I was like, I expected I was somehow going to be good at jiu-jitsu because I hadn't experienced it. Yeah. You know, so yeah. I was like, I had never done it. I watched it and I was like, okay, this isn't going to be too bad. It's like that thing where someone sits around and watches a football game and they're watching it from the comfort of their lazy boy chair. And, you know, you have no concept about how large, how fast, how technical all these different players are and what they're doing. And then if you actually go to a football game and you like see the size of these linemen that are coming out, and then you look at them charging into some guy that they're going to get ready to tackle, you kind of start to say, well, maybe I can't throw the football better than the quarterback because holy moly, look what's going on out there. And you look at how fast things are going. Once you have like you have contrast with what things are actually really like, it's different. And so for a lot of people, like for me, when I was in the beginning, I thought I was going to be good at jiu-jitsu. And then I realized, oh man, I suck at this because I haven't trained, but I, at the same time, wasn't discouraged by that. I was like, this is pretty cool. Like I suck at this and these guys kicked my butt. I need to go do this more. But again, some people have the opposite reaction to that situation.
Right. And I think you can develop that intelligence or that smart, you know, being a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner, because a lot of us go in some of us go in, we're fairly athletic or good at a different sport, and we think it's going to translate, carry over. And then some little tiny person just mops the floor with us. You hear that story all the time. And there's two types of people. There's the people that want to come back and say, that was the craziest thing. I want to learn that. I want to know what happened. Versus the other ones, they're just like, this is not for me, or they can't accept that that defeat, I guess. And they never come back. It's like, you see it all the time. People think they're tough and they come in like, I want to fight UFC. right? You see that, used to see it all the time. People come in,
Oh
you put
yeah.
them with a little sparring partner that just picks them apart, or we put little Chad when he was a 15-year-old kid, put him on these grown men and have them, have their way with them. And some people can't handle that.
That's right. The next one, a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner never goes on a trip without some gear to train in, just in case. So this is just something like you just never know when a jiu-jitsu session could pop up or when you could get an opportunity to, even if you don't think that there's anything around. I remember we were in Costa Rica back in 2017. 2017. Yes, we're down in Costa Rica. We're in Nosara at the time. And we were having this big session that we were going to do, on at the place that we were staying at on one of the last days that we were training. And so we were going to train with like our camp group that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we were going to have some of the locals that trained there. We're going to be there as well. And then we're just completely randomly, we're driving through town on a golf cart. We run into some guy who's got a Gracie Humaita shirt on, and we're like, "Hey, bro, you train jiu-jitsu?" He's like, "Yeah." He's a black belt under so-and-so. We start chatting, whatever. And we're like, "Bro, like, we're going to have a big rolling session tonight. Come out and train." He's like, "I don't have a gi." We'll find you a gi. Come out and train,
Yeah.
And then we found another dude. We were sitting there eating dinner or eating lunch somewhere. And then this guy like says, "Hey man, do you guys train jiu-jitsu?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm a purple belt. It's so-and-so, da-da-da." I'm like, "Cool." I was like, "Well, come train jiu-jitsu with us tonight." He's like, "Oh, I don't have a gi. We'll get you one." And so we ended up recruiting, God, dude, like probably 5 or 6 people that way just through a random
awesome.
day. The group, which again, our group was like around 17 to 18 people. It swelled up to like 44 people or something that night at the training session, which is massive in this little surf town, with all these jiu-jitsu people. And we had to spot some gis. So again, you never know. You might end up having a situation where you might have to train, or you might find an opportunity to train. So I always pack a rash guard and a gi with me, no matter where I go or what I'm doing, just in case. I always just sort of stuff one in there.
Yep. And also good to have one in your car just in case, because you never know. You might grab the wrong bag going to practice. So if I was a smart practitioner, I took my stuff. I used to have a gi and a belt in my car at all times, and I like cleaned it out and I haven't put it back in. So I happened to grab the wrong bag going to practice, but luckily I was able to scrounge up some stuff.
Yeah, I almost always have a gi or like a gi or a rash guard or whatever in my car as well.
Yeah, for sure.
There was a tournament back in 2012 or no 2013. I just got back from Spain, and I get to this competition, and there was this black belt there who wasn't a jiu-jitsu black belt. He was a black belt in some other martial art of some sort, and he was basically telling people that he was not, because black belts just at the time, especially in Louisville, weren't really that common. They're still not common, but there weren't a lot of them, and so there were only brown belts up to brown belts, purple belts, blue belts, the white belts registered for this competition. But there was this black belt there in some other martial art who had done some grappling and said that he was not going to basically belittle himself by going with brown belts. And some of the brown belts there were pretty darn tough, and so they probably would have kicked his butt. But the guy who ran the tournament came up to me and asked if I would compete in the tournament. And I told him, "Oh man, I don't have a gi with me. I just got back from Spain last night at like 12 o'clock. So I was like, I won't be able to do it." He's like, "Okay." And then one of my students started saying, "Come on, Chewy, man, let us see you compete. It'd be so cool to see you compete. And I've never seen you compete before." So I went ahead and came up to him. I said, "Hey man, let me go grab my gi and I'll compete." And he said, "Oh, I thought you said you didn't have a gi." I was like, "I never leave my house without a gi. I've always got one." So of course. But and then I went in there with the guy and wrist locked him in about like 30 seconds.
Dirty wrist locker, you?
No, he wasn't very good. He didn't actually train jiu-jitsu. He trained something else. And again, it's just different. So again, It is what it is. Now, last one says for this series, a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner has both intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for training. And this is pretty simple. Basically, you've got to have internal motivations and you've got to have some external ones. External ones are things that people most of the time get really focused on, but the internal ones are really important too. And again, the internal ones are far more slippery to grab a hold of. A lot of times it's hard because it requires some thinking. Like you can ask people like, "Why do you do this?" And a lot of times they don't know for a lot of things. They're like, "I don't know, I just do it." So you're going to have to think about that one a little bit, but it's good to have intrinsic motivations and deep reasons for why you're doing what you're doing, because you're going to need those when the extrinsic motivations don't always come like you want them to.
Yeah.
And that's important. This is where an extrinsic motivation, it could be a belt. There's nothing wrong with that. Like having a belt as a motivation, saying someday I want to be a blue belt or purple belt or whatever, that's fine. But you should also have some stuff along the way that's like, why am I doing this? Why am I internally doing this on a deep level? And again, that takes a lot of thinking.
What are some of your intrinsic motivators? Do you have anything, like one or two?
Sure. I like being around the people on the mat. I very much enjoy the community because in a time where society is incredibly fragmented over the dumbest stuff, like where everything that pops up in front of us is always divisive, right? If you look at the news and stuff, the stuff that's online, again, and I try to get rid of as much as I can, but it's really hard to. And if I just want to see like what's going on in the news, because I don't want to be completely naive, almost everything's divided half and half on this subject, right? And so I like coming into a place where we're all together and we're different, and that's not a bad thing, right? Like whereas outside of the gym, a lot of times when you're different, when you don't agree with someone on every single topic, you're somehow a bad person, on one side of the political fence, like you're a bigot, racist, transphobic, whatever derogatory name we want to use. And then on the other side, you're a friggin' like libtard who's not an American or whatever they want to say, right? It's like the same stuff. And so it's nice to be in a place where we're like, oh, cool. Like, hey, look, you're a little different than me, but I really like you as a person. You're cool as shit. Like, and we're going to hang out and it's all good. I like that. So that's one of the things that I really like about the gym. And that's changed because it didn't always used to be that way, it seemed like. And so, but as things have gotten a little wild and polarized, jiu-jitsu is it's not a polarizing place in our gym. And I like that. I like being around people like that. There's obviously the fitness aspect. I like training because I feel better afterwards. Like almost every training session with very few exceptions, when I walk out of the gym, I feel good. I had a great training session. I feel, oh, man, that was fun, whatever. And I have that great feeling. And I also enjoy the fun aspect of trying to like work on new stuff and figure out how it works. Like I find that game where you're trying to figure out new techniques and use them against people entertaining, like where, maybe someone beats my technique today. So now I've got to figure out something new for them. And then I'm trying to solve that problem that they're giving me. And so that's three. Those are three reasons why I do it, because I enjoy those things. Again, they could be different for everybody.
Yeah.
When I was younger, those reasons were a little different. They were changed. They were different, but they've changed as I've gotten older.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those. And like the community is a huge thing. We've talked about that in the past. That's a huge thing. That's just the people and even just the conversation. I also really love that it forces me to do something difficult and it keeps me a little bit sharp in that way. Because I think we can get a little soft, I think, if we don't really challenge ourselves consistently. I think in jiu-jitsu, every time I'm there, I'm going to be challenged in some way. I'm going to be pushed, and I think that forces me to be a little bit tougher mentally. And then, I love the way I feel after I train. Even though if my body aches a little bit, I kind of like that. I like to feel like I put myself through something difficult. And then, of course, extrinsic factors we're going to touch on, but it could be a belt or it could be like a gold medal or winning a tournament or what have you. But and
there's nothing wrong with those.
No, there's not. And I think they go hand in hand. And I think if you only have extrinsic goals, those may not be fulfilling completely. You got to have intrinsic ones as well.
Yeah, the thing about extrinsic goals a lot of times is that like you get them and they're not bad to have because they are very motivating. Getting a gold medal and standing up on top of the podium, that could be really an intrinsic and extrinsic, because that feeling of getting up on top of the podium and, basically having the, adoration of your peers and your coaches and stuff like that. That's an intoxicating feeling, bro. I got that the first time when I was a teenager in high school wrestling, and I love that feeling. There's not quite another feeling like it in some respects. But at the same time, it's an extrinsic because we're getting this thing for it, right? We're getting a title associated with it or whatever. And so they can inhabit both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
But you have to find meaningful goals that are really important to you on a deep visceral level that you want. That's not about society. It's like something you want. That's a big deal. That's important.
Right.
A lot of times we chase after things because we're supposed to, and we don't even know why we're chasing after them. We just do it. It's like, someone will go out and go buy an expensive home or car. And if that's what they want, perfectly fine. Go buy your expensive home or your car. But if you buy it and you don't really know why you're getting it, you just feel like you're doing it because that's what you're supposed to do, then there's an issue, because now you're not being aware of what it is that you're doing. And going back to like the earlier thing that we talked about, it's just like when you're rolling, you've got to be in tune with what are you doing? Why are you committing these actions that you're doing? Is this what you want to do? Because if it's not, then you can change that. You don't have to do those things. But again, that takes a lot of self-awareness and also takes a lot of thought. And a lot of times people don't like to think. Thinking requires it's energy, right? You have to sit down and stew on something.
Yep.
It's far more entertaining to just pop up your phone and flip on TikTok and just scroll and be numbed a little bit and watch some. It's basically become, instead of watching TV all the time like people used to, now that we have like Netflix and Hulu, we've kind of really become precision based with our TV watching, where we kind of only watch the stuff we want to watch, and which not everybody's like this, but a lot of people are. But then now it's become this thing where people just, they lose their life scrolling, and they just numb themselves to that when they could be doing something that could be useful to their life or super important.
Yep. Yeah, I do think that you have to have a solid intrinsic goals and intrinsic kind of things that you do. I think that's what keeps you going, essentially.
Sure.
Because we talked to Muhammad on the podcast, and his extrinsic goal was to win the world championship, and he did that. And then he had a little bit of a lull, like, well, what am I doing? I've accomplished this big thing. It's almost like you go into a state of like depression in some way, and you're like, man, what am I doing? I've accomplished the pinnacle of this thing. Why am I doing it now, right? If it's not for because I've already done the extrinsic things. What's the intrinsic thing? Why am I doing that?
Well, and that's the thing, and the more you realize this, the better off you'll be. When you chase big goals, they're good, but the most valuable thing you get from those big extrinsic goals is that you change who you are. Because a lot of times, in order to reach a big extrinsic goal, you have to become a different person. You're like the person that wins the white belt tournament is not the person that wins the black belt worlds. Two different people. They may have the same name, they may have the same hair and look the same. Those are two different people. The person that makes $50,000 versus $100,000 versus $1 million versus $1 billion. Every one of those people is a different person. Even if that same person worked their way up the ladder, every one of those people at that point is a different human being on a deep, deep level. And so a lot of times when you get those big goals, they're worthwhile, but you've got to be careful because they can be alluring, and but when you get to them, you'll feel like the same person. Now you've changed.
Sure.
But you have to take a step back and realize, man, look what I've accomplished and look at who I've become, rather than not just this, who I got a gold medal. Great. Okay. Well, who did you become to get that gold medal? Like, what have you accomplished along the way to make that happen? Or, like if you get some particular amount of money, like I remember the first time, growing up poor as a kid, I remember there was a monetary number in my head that I thought was just like, out of reason. It was a number that I just simply would not exist doing jiu-jitsu. I was like, this is a number that just doesn't exist.
Yep.
It's not going to happen. And I hit it. I was like, what now? Right? Like, that's neat. Like, but what now? And then it's like, but then you have to look back and like, oh, look at all this cool stuff that I've made happen in order to make this thing happen. And this is all really, really cool. Like, look at these people I've helped. Look at this thing that I've built with the help of other people. And all this is really cool. And so there's other things that you can kind of look back on. So sometimes when we get those extrinsic goals, you have to be careful, because like if anybody's, put a lot of stock into a big competition and you won, and you have almost a little bit of depression a week after, where you're just kind of like, all right, that's done with, what now, or you get your blue belt, you get the blue belt blues.
Yep.
Again, you put a little bit too much into that extrinsic goal. It's good to have those external rewards, are very good. But again, you have to place a lot of emphasis on like, who did you become to make that thing happen? Because that's the most valuable thing that you get. And that can sometimes be a nice way to sort of snap you back into the groove of things once you've got one of those external rewards.
Right. No, I agree with that. And sometimes on the other side of it, if you don't reach that extrinsic goal, why are you doing it? Maybe you don't win the world title, and you get discouraged from that aspect. Like, all right, well, maybe it's not something that's in the cards. Well, what am I going to do now? What do I want to accomplish, or why am I still doing this thing if this is maybe unattainable?
Right. And then you fall back on the internal goals, the intrinsic ones.
Yep.
All right, guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the podcast today. Hopefully there is something you guys got out of that can be useful to you. Again, if you guys have feedback or something that you said or that we said on the podcast was useful to you, we love getting messages from you. If you want to shoot us a message on Instagram, you can do so at Instagram, and then put in the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and you can shoot us a message over there. Love to hear from you. You could also give us a review if you've got time to do that. And then you could also send us an email at the jiu-jitsupodcast@gmail.com. That's another way to do it. If you guys have some positive feedback from the podcast that you've experienced, we like hearing about it, because it's not like YouTube where we have comments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, YouTube, it's like people can just drop a comments and say whatever. It's harder to get feedback from a podcast, but we see the numbers going up and the downloads and stuff. But again, there's not as much interaction as there are in other things. But again, if you guys want to, feel free to do that. Guys, as always, thanks to our sponsors, charlottesweb.com. Promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 to save 20% off Charlotte's Web products. Again, if you've never tried CBD, I encourage you to give it a whirl, see what you experience. Try it for a month and see what kind of effects you have on it. See if it's benefited you as much as it has me. And again, you can save 20% off on your first order with Jiu-Jitsu20 at checkout at charlottesweb.com. Also, thanks to Epic Roll. Matt at Epic Roll is a Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, a black belt who makes Jiu-Jitsu gear for Jiu-Jitsu people. And again, I love supporting him. He makes great stuff. You can check out his gis, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, the whole thing at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu to save 15% off the order. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Easy investing doesn't have to be intimidating. In fact, accessible investing happens every day on the Acorns app. Acorns takes your spare change from your daily purchases and invests it into portfolios that can grow with time. On average, Acorns users invest $490 a year just from spare change alone. Start putting your spare change to work and get a bonus $20 with an investment of $5 from you when you sign up at the Acorns app by going to acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to the patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast to get extra content that we don't release anywhere else. And you can do so at a very inexpensive rate. What did we used to say? It's less than 23 cents or something? Less
Something
than a quarter?
like that.
I used to go on some rant about it being less than a quarter. But you can check out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast.
It reminds you of like, adopt this child. So adopt this podcast for less than 25 cents a day.
Adopt this podcast for less than 25 cents a day. And you'll get...
Cue the Sarah McLachlan and...
I bet
sad puppies. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll do sad. God, that commercial is terrible. Like just seeing all those sad dogs.
Well, I think it was it the dogs or the children? The children was bad too.
The one I didn't see the one with the kids. The one I saw with Sarah McLachlan was the one with the dogs.
Is that the dogs? Yeah, and they're like staring at you and like
they're just staring at you. And they've got their ears pinned back and they're just like looking at you and they got those big brown eyes. You're like, oh, this is terrible.
Give me all the dogs. I'm adopting all of them.
It's terrible. Well, dogs are just like, it's one of those things, man. You can't help but like love dogs.
I know.
I mean, some people, I'm sure some people don't, but like,
even if they're assholes, and my dogs can be assholes sometimes, but I mean, I love
oh
them
yeah.
so
Well, I mean, like, dogs and cats both are assholes, but then they look at you and you're like, God, you're darn cute. Come here.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
whatever.
Let me pet you. Shit.
Yeah. Let me roll over and get your belly rubbed now.
That's right.
And also, guys, if you want to get my email newsletter and get 3 free ebooks, you can do so by going to jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. And along with that, you'll get my daily newsletter that I send out. You'll get access to some free ebooks. And also, you'll get access to different discounts and special offers that I give to people that I don't really give anywhere else because I communicate with my email list the most directly. And so right now, I'll let you guys know about it. I'm doing a soft launch with a competition-based product. It's basically for preparation related to competition. A lot of people message me saying they don't feel confident with their preparation to competitions. They don't know if it's the right time to compete. They don't know if they should cut weight. They don't, all these different things. And so I put it together in one product to try to answer as many questions as possible and help people get ready for their next competition. And again, it's geared towards people who are a student of a gym, not a coach, because again, coaches have direct control of their training. Most students do not. but there's still some strategies that you can employ to get really good focus training that can prepare you for your next competition. So again, if you join up at my email list, you'll get information about that, and you'll typically get a better price than you'll pay regularly on the internet. So that's that. So guys, again, thank you so much for joining us this Monday or whenever you're listening to this, and we'll talk to you next time.